I just want to clarify something, I said, blinking too fast to be normal. I'm being let go the week before Black Friday. Tom cleared his throat like a man about to propose marriage to a cactus. It's not personal, Mary. We're embracing new efficiencies. The landscape is changing. And you, I turned slowly to Sarah, the HR rep whose job title might as well have been sole extraction technician. You're telling me this with a straight face while sipping a pumpkin spice latte from a company mug that I designed for Employee Appreciation Week? Sarah's eyes flinched barely. We value your contributions. We just believe it's time for a fresh perspective. That's when the door opened and in waltzed him. Chad, mid-20s, sport coat over a hoodie, hair styled like it owed him money. If confidence could be bottled and sold at a frat party, Chad would be their mascot. He extended his hand like he was doing me a favor. Excited to take things to the next level, he beamed, big fan of streamlining. I've already started drafting a Python replacement for the, distributor thingy. Ah, there it was. I nodded once, very slow. The kind of nod you give a man who just lit a cigarette next to a leaking gas main. The distributor, I said, has a few quirks, especially under stress. Chad grinned. Don't worry, we've got automation now. Scripts, baby. It took every cell in my body not to break into laughter. He thought he was upgrading from rotary phone to iPhone. What he didn't know was that the distributor wasn't a system. It was a Frankenstein's monster built from a decade of undocumented logic, weird Excel macros, and caffeine-induced witchcraft. It worked only because I did. Look, before we go any further, 97% of you watching this haven't subscribed. I'm trying to hit 10,000 for the first time in my life, and it'd mean the world if you tapped that button. You won't regret it unless you're Chad. Then I hope you regret it. Anyway, they handed me a tote bag and a generic thank you for your service card that looked like it was recycled from a sympathy aisle at CVS. I didn't say much. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just smiled. It was the smile of a woman who just realized the demolition crew forgot to check if the building still had gas lines. The next 2 weeks were a performance piece. I handed over documentation like a nun offering stale wafers, just enough to look holy, not enough to nourish. I gave Chad flowcharts with missing links, spreadsheets with macro names like Donut Delete Final 2, and notes that said things like refer to Mary's manual overrides, without actually including said manual. And he loved it. Called me old school in that tone Gen Z uses when they mean obsolete. He was too busy babbling to upper management about real-time dashboards and cloud-native pivoting to notice he'd been handed a bomb with a cheerful post-it that read, "Good luck, sweetheart." Tom gave me a limp handshake on my final day. "We're going to miss your thoroughness." I patted his arm like he was a malfunctioning toaster. "Just remember to keep an eye on the distributor during peak volume." Chad snorted behind him. "It's already in the cloud, Mary. This isn't 2009. Right, they say revenge is best served cold. Personally, I prefer it refrigerated overnight and served on fine china. But we weren't there yet, not quite. First, I had to go home, pack away 20 years of my life, and wait for the fireworks to start. Because the thing about the distributor, it doesn't crash. It mutates, and Black Friday was coming. On my second to last day, I found myself labeling a drawer cables don't throw out, knowing full well that half of those cords belonged to dead tech from 2013, and the other half were integral to keeping 3 legacy payment subsystems breathing. I watched Chad walk past with an oat milk smoothie in one hand and a Bluetooth headset stuck to his temple like he was giving an earnings call to God. Didn't even glance at the servers. Instead, he hosted back-to-back meetings with titles like Cloud Migration Kickoff and Workflow Efficiency Roundtable. Translation: PowerPoint karaoke set to buzzwords. Meanwhile, I was the only one who remembered that the distributor crashed if you fed it more than 30,000 transactions without manually toggling internal mode 5. A setting buried 4 folders deep in a backup directory named Old Mary Stuff Do Not Touch. But I documented. Oh, I documented. I left behind SOPs so pristine they could be laminated and hung in a museum of corporate delusion. Everything looked perfect. Float charts, diagrams, password sheets. There was even a FAQ section titled Common Questions from Junior Analysts, every answer a gentle shove toward disaster. Malicious compliance is an art form, and I painted my masterpiece with a dry erase marker and a warm smile. There were moments it hurt. Like when I found the sticky note from 5 years ago where my daughter had scribbled, "Love you, Mommy, don't work too late," and stuck it to my monitor. Or when I unplugged the tiny fan under my desk that Brenda lent me during the great HVAC collapse of 18. Speaking of Brenda, on my last coffee break, she found me hiding behind the vending machines, shoving the rest of my career into a cardboard box. She slid in beside me like a ghost at a funeral. "Are they insane?" she whispered, eyes darting toward the open plan battlefield. "The entire payment system is basically you and 3 janky Excel files that scream when you open them." I shrugged, sipping stale coffee like it was sacramental wine. They wanted agility. "It's going to be a bloodbath," she muttered, then added, "You didn't tell him about the monthly recalc script that corrupts the ledger if it runs during a sync, did you?" "Wouldn't dream of it." We shared a look. The kind that said we both know what's coming and I'm bringing popcorn. Later that afternoon, Chad cornered me by the printer with a casual, "Hey, do you know where the master pivot source pulls from?" I smiled. "Oh, that's documented." It wasn't. Not really. The reference was in a Google sheet that linked to a private folder locked behind an expired token. It had worked for me because I never logged out. For anyone else, it may as well have been in Narnia. He nodded like he understood, then immediately turned to talk to Tom about automating reconciliation using APIs. Tom nodded sagely, the way men do when they're too proud to admit they have no idea what any of those words mean. I went back to my desk, watched the final email backup bar crawl across the screen, and clicked sign out for the last time. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt surgical, like severing a limb you've lived with too long, necessary, but still full of phantom aches. As I walked out, Brenda gave me a thumbs up from the help desk corner. I gave her a wink. The distributor was theirs now. God help them. The first Monday after retirement felt like falling into a well. No alarms, no traffic, no morning routine of teeth grinding over coffee while Outlook devoured my soul. Just silence, and an unholy number of hours to fill. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a granola bar like it owed me an apology. My email was quiet. My calendar was blank. My existence, once managed in 15-minute increments, had expanded into a shapeless void. I wasn't needed. Not by Tom, not by Chad, not by anyone. Except maybe my daughter. Emma and I hadn't had a real conversation in 3 years. Not since I missed her college graduation because of a budget audit and lied about it being a surprise compliance review. She didn't buy it. She stopped picking up. I kept working. Rinse, repeat. But now I had a severance check and no excuses, so I booked a flight. Sat by the window, gripping the armrest like turbulence might knock me back into my inbox. When she opened the door, I half expected her to slam it. Instead, she blinked twice and stepped aside without a word. She made coffee. I offered to help. She said, "You don't know where anything is." She was right. The first 2 days were stiff. Small talk, long silences, forced smiles that cracked like cheap porcelain. On the third night, over Chinese takeout, it broke. "You missed a lot," she said, staring into her low mane. "I know. I mean a lot, Mom. I needed you. And all you did was chase, what, budget reconciliation?" "I know," I said again. My voice felt like gravel, and I was wrong. And for the first time in years, I didn't try to justify it. No excuses. No, I was under pressure or I did it for us. Just the truth, raw and ugly. We talked until 2 a.m. about everything. Her first panic attack, my second mortgage, the guilt, the loneliness. The time she broke her arm and I emailed the ER from a boardroom while Tom babbled about net margins. I cried. She didn't. She just passed me a tissue and said, "That's a start." We didn't become best friends overnight, but something thawed. We cooked together. She showed me her studio, her paintings. I helped her build a bookshelf. She laughed when I stripped a screw and swore like a sailor. I felt more human in that week than I had in a decade, and then it came. A little blue notification on my phone. LinkedIn. Chad R. Hey Mary, quick Q. What does error DS07? Ledger sync deferred due to stale payload mean? Haha, sorry to bug ya. I stared at it for a long time. That error was the canary in the coal mine. It meant the distributor had started rejecting transaction clusters because the manual cache hadn't been refreshed. Left alone, it would spiral into a cascade failure, one that couldn't be patched remotely or fixed with scripts. I locked my phone, tucked it under a dish towel. Didn't answer. Later that evening, Emma handed me a glass of wine and pointed to the porch swing. "Come on," she said, "sunset's trying its best." We sat in quiet, cicadas buzzed. The sky went from orange to bruised purple, and I felt something I hadn't in years, stillness, peace. The old me would have messaged Chad back, fixed it, been the hero behind the curtain. But now I was just a woman on a porch swing, watching the sunset with her daughter, knowing full well that somewhere miles away. Ticking time bomb was warming up for Black Friday, and the only person who could stop it wasn't picking up. The press release found me in the middle of potting a basil plant that Emma insisted would ground my mornings. I just washed dirt off my fingers when my phone buzzed with a headline from a tech retail blog I used to half-read during coffee breaks. Econova Project's record-breaking Black Friday surge following restructuring success. I clicked. Couldn't help it. The headline was bait. The content was comedy. It opened with a glossy photo of Tom, standing in front of a wall of monitors like he was commanding a space shuttle. The article was littered with phrases that sounded like a thesaurus had thrown up: unprecedented scalability, post-legacy optimization, cost synergy actualization. But the part that made me snort basil water was this little gem, straight from Tom's mouth. By streamlining our internal operations and empowering a new generation of agile leadership, we've positioned ourselves to handle a 40% increase in transaction volume this season. 40%. I had to sit down. My ribs ached from laughing. Because here's the thing, the distributor couldn't even sneeze past a 20% surge without choking. And that was with me manually toggling patch scripts, resetting dead indexes, and bribing the old test server with a sacrificial can of Mountain Dew. Chad didn't know any of that. Hell, Chad didn't even know what a cold ledger rollback was. And now Tom was out there in the wild, flapping his gums about agile transformation like a man who had never once touched the inside of the beast they'd built their empire on. It wasn't anger I felt. Not anymore. That fire had burned out weeks ago. This was different. Sharper. Cooler, the smug. Own deep satisfaction of watching someone piss on a fuse because they thought it was just a string. Brenda texted not 10 minutes later, saw the article. Should I start drinking now or wait for the second server room to catch fire? I replied with a single word, both. That night I made tea, sat by the window, watched the wind shake the trees while inside my head I ran numbers, not out of concern, out of habit. They thought 40% growth meant success. To them, it was a press release and a bonus check. To me, it meant over 200,000 concurrent transactions hitting the distributor in a 12-hour span, which meant it would misroute at least 3% of those if no one purged the manual cache mid-cycle. Add to that the fact that they'd sunset the old Q monitor without replacing it properly, and you had a system so unstable it might as well be doing shots of Everclear. It wasn't a question of if it would fail, only how loud. Emma wandered in at one point, glanced at my screen, and asked, "You okay?" I turned it off, better than I've been in a long time, because for the first time in years I wasn't the one holding the line. I wasn't hunched over a keyboard at 2 a.m., praying a patch would hold. I wasn't the invisible spine keeping their arrogance upright. Nope. Now I was just a retired woman with dirt under her fingernails, a mended bridge with her daughter, and a front row seat to the biggest financial implosion their smug little boardroom had ever seen. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was wait. The night before Black Friday felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane that hadn't arrived yet, but you could hear it, humming behind the horizon like a war drum. I was curled up on the couch, blanket over my knees, a mug of chamomile steaming quietly on the coffee table. Emma was out with friends, a pre-holiday gallery opening, and the house was finally still. Peaceful. For once, there was no Outlook notification, no Slack ping dragging me into another spreadsheet autopsy. Just me, my tea, and a rerun of some British baking show where everyone was far too polite. Then my phone buzzed. Brenda, 7:43 p.m., they did a final stress simulation today. It failed, but Chad told leadership it was a minor server lag. He's trying to manually patch it. God help us. I stared at the screen for a full minute, letting the words settle in like sediment in a glass of bad wine. A manual patch? That boy couldn't manually open a jar of pickles without Googling it. And now he was elbow deep in production code, probably slicing open logic gates like he was gutting fish, with no clue he was standing on a landmine. Minor server lag. That was adorable. In reality, that failure wasn't lag. It was the distributor kicking up its first round of digital blood clots. Once the sync queues desync and the internal hash tables start tripping on stale pointers, you don't get lag, you get corruption. Cascading, irreversible corruption that spreads like mold through every order ID and refund token. I took a long sip of tea, burned my tongue, and still smiled. It was over, not the system. The denial, the delusion. The final stress test was supposed to be there. We got this moment. Instead, Chad, the human embodiment of a TED talk with no substance, decided to patch the Titanic with chewing gum and positive vibes. And Tom, probably still out there congratulating himself for mentoring young talent. I didn't respond to Brenda's text. What was there to say? Instead, I lit a cinnamon candle, put my feet up, opened my laptop not to work, but to add 2 things to my personal to-do list. Buy new porch furniture. Watch Econova burn. I checked LinkedIn, mostly out of morbid curiosity. Chad had posted a selfie from the server room earlier that afternoon, grinning in front of a rack of blinking lights with the caption, "Prepping for battle, flexed biceps, #Black Friday, #leadership, #optimization, oh, sweetheart." If I were still there, I'd have quarantined the staging queue hours ago, reset the orphan ledger chains manually, redirected excess transactions through the backup node. Hell, I'd have bribed Brenda with bourbon to babysit the cash timer overnight. But I wasn't there, and they didn't want me. Now they had Chad. And Chad had a ring light and an ego, but not a single damn clue what kind of digital Pandora's box he was picking at with his minor patch. Somewhere, deep inside the distributor, file named Ledger Hold Legacy Reconciliation V3 Marafinal XLSM sat untouched, waiting for the moment too many unsynced records flooded the system at once. It would scream, and they wouldn't hear it. Not until the refunds went sideways. Not until the ledger totals started bouncing like bad checks. Not until chaos dropped out of the cloud like a bad omen wrapped in code. And by then, well, by then it would be Black Friday. It started at 5:07 a.m. Somewhere in a data center the size of a Costco, a line of code inside the distributor hiccuped. It was small, just a nudge. An order flagged for expedited processing was routed through the standard pipeline instead. A timestamp misaligned by 2 seconds. A memory call fired off before the payload had finalized. But like a dropped stitch in a parachute, that one slip unraveled everything. By 5:21, refund loops were triggering with no originating transaction IDs. By 6:03, the system began crediting accounts twice, sometimes thrice. By 6:17, the first customer posted on Twitter that they'd been charged $932 for a $32 Bluetooth speaker and got a refund for $6,000. I didn't know any of that at the time. At 6:30, I was feeding ducks. Emma had begged me to get out of the house and leave my phone behind, so I did. We packed a thermos, walked to the park, and sat on a bench near the big oak tree. The wind was sharp, the sun low. I wrapped my scarf around my neck and watched two toddlers try to wrestle a baguette away from a very determined squirrel. I wasn't thinking about Chad. I wasn't thinking about the distributor. I was thinking about how peaceful the world is when you're no longer the one holding back the flood. But back at Econova, it was biblical. Chad, sleep-deprived and armed with little more than blind confidence and half-remembered JIRA tickets, had deployed a hotfix at 4:42 a.m. It was meant to stabilize transaction sequencing. What it actually did was bypass the reconciliation buffer entirely. System stopped verifying balances before marking them as settled. Orders were fulfilled based on ghost records. Payments were applied to the wrong customers. Refunds were triggered for people who hadn't even placed an order. One customer got 9 air fryers. Another got nothing but a heartfelt email that said thanks for your patience during peak fulfillment. And because the system didn't crash, because it kept going, the damage spread. It spread like fire through a dry forest, invisible at first, until the smoke curled through the walls of the executive suite. By noon, Tom had canceled his lunch meeting. Sarah from HR had locked herself in a wellness pod. The finance team was quietly hyperventilating into company-branded tote bags as they tried to explain why the ledger reports showed a $14 million negative variance with no trail. By 1:34 p.m., they shut down live ordering for maintenance. The press release called it a temporary bandwidth adjustment. Internally, it was a 5-alarm fire. Somewhere in that chaos, I imagine Brenda was standing off to the side, arms crossed, watching it all go up in smoke while Chad tapped his keyboard like a man trying to reboot a toaster with a wrench. I didn't get the first voicemail until late afternoon. I was on the porch, sipping cider, watching the light disappear through the last of the leaves. I saw the missed calls, the unknown numbers, the Slack pings from an account I hadn't used in months, all flooding in like the tide. I ignored every one of them because this wasn't my problem anymore. This was their masterpiece, the direct result of budget cuts, ego, and the belief that experience could be replaced with enthusiasm and a half-baked script. They had treated me like a relic. Now they were praying to the ruins. I walked through the door just after sunset, the scent of roasted vegetables still clinging to my coat, cheeks pink from the cold. Emma was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming to herself as she tried, bless her heart, to make sourdough from scratch. She looked up and smiled. I smiled back. For a second, it was like nothing had changed. And then my phone lit up like a Christmas tree hooked to a car battery. 42 missed calls, 17 voicemails, a tidal wave of texts, all from numbers I hadn't saved and some I'd long since deleted. The first one I opened was from Jenny in accounting, once the only person brave enough to microwave fish in the break room. Hi, Mary. Just wondering if you're free for a quick consult? Tiny thing, haha, no big deal. Call me back when you can, please. The timestamp was 10:16 a.m. Next was from Greg in compliance. Urgent, any chance you remember the reconciliation order for the legacy distributor triggers? We're hitting anomalies across all buckets. Please advise. Then came Tom. At first formal, hey Mary, hoping to touch base, something's come up with the ledger processing sequence and we think you might have insight. Then a little more urgent. Mary, please, the board's breathing down my neck. Just one call. We'll compensate you. Then came Sarah. Her voicemail was 2 minutes and 14 seconds of corporate panic coated in syrup. Hi Mary, it's Sarah from HR. Just looping back again to express how much we value your historical knowledge and how we'd love to explore a formal engagement opportunity. Things are, moving quickly on our end. I'll spare you the details, but we're facing some serious reconciliation inconsistencies. I think you'd be a hero if you helped guide us through it. Please call anytime, I'm available, like literally anytime. The words hero and guide were doing some heavy lifting in that voicemail. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, tea cooling beside me. Emma peeked around the corner. That them, hum. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. You gonna help them? I took a deep breath, let it out slow. Eventually. She smirked and disappeared back into the kitchen, humming again, unbothered by the digital wildfire erupting inside my inbox. And then, Brenda. Brenda 5:02 p.m., CEO's on site. Tom looks like he's seen a ghost. They're talking about halting all sales. Chad hasn't moved in 20 minutes, just staring at his monitor like the numbers personally betrayed him. It's bad, Mary, beautifully bad. That text, that was dessert. Because this was the checkmate I'd been building piece by piece for weeks. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with patience. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to gloat. All I had to do was be right. They thought I was replaceable. They thought Chad's swagger and a Python script could outthink 20 years of instinct, duct tape, and dirty knowledge built under the pressure of 15 straight Q4s. They were wrong. Now the tables had turned, and I wasn't just holding the cards, I was the damn deck. They didn't need a consultant, they needed a miracle, and I was charging by the hour. The call came in just after 11:40 p.m., the exact moment the house had gone completely still, no more dishes clinking, no more footsteps upstairs. Even the fridge had gone quiet, as if the entire world had taken a deep, anticipatory breath. My phone buzzed once. Then again, unknown number. I answered without saying a word. A moment of static, then a voice, tight and brittle like it had been squeezed through too many clenched teeth in too few hours. Mary, this is Alan. I'm the CEO now. I hope I'm not waking you. I let the silence hold. Let it stretch long enough for him to feel it. Let it wrap around his words like a vice. He cleared his throat. Right, of course. I won't waste time with pleasantries. I know it's late. I know this is unexpected. But we're in a situation. A very serious one. His voice cracked then, barely, but I heard it. That subtle quiver that happens when a man who's always been in control realizes the wheel isn't connected to the engine anymore. The distributor, it's corrupted. Completely. Orders are misaligned, payments are vanishing into system logs, refund requests are duplicating without verification, our entire ledger is unraveling. I said nothing. I've already had 2 emergency board calls. Legal's on red alert. We're hemorrhaging cash and the system doesn't even know it. And Tom, well, let's just say Tom's no longer leading this effort. Still, I said nothing, just breathed, just listened. Just watched the faint swirl of steam curling out of my tea like a halo for the wicked. We need your help, I won't lie. It's a catastrophe. Full blown. I don't care about blame. I don't care how we got here. Just tell us what you want. A consulting fee, equity, name your price. There it was, the magic phrase. Name your price. Not can you help us. Not would you be willing. Not we made a mistake. Just pure uncut desperation. I let 5 full seconds tick by before I even moved. Then I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the moonlit yard. Mary, he said, voice smaller now. Are you still there? Still, I said nothing. Because silence, when wielded correctly, is not passive. It is power. He was waiting for the old me, the fixer. Loyalist, the quiet miracle who stayed up until 3 a.m. to save them from themselves. But she was gone. All that remained was the woman they underestimated. The one who'd walked away and let the fire spread. He exhaled, the breath of a man realizing just how far the fall was. Whatever it is, he said, almost whispering now, we'll meet it. We'll approve it. We just need you. I finally spoke. Soft, precise. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I'll send terms, I said. Then I hung up. The email was 3 sentences long. Subject line, terms, no dear Alan, no pleasantries, no smiley face or hope this finds you well. Just bullets, hard, clean, cold, $2 million consulting fee. Wired upfront, no invoices, no net 30. Termination of Tom and Chad, effective immediately. No reassignment, no golden parachutes. A company-wide email from the CEO himself acknowledging my critical contributions, apologizing for my dismissal, and this was important, stating publicly that my replacement was underqualified. A permanent remote consulting retainer, $20,000 a month, 5 hours per month for life, indexed for inflation. Final line, no negotiations. You called me, you're out of moves. I pressed send, then made toast. It took 23 minutes. At 12:17 a.m., a reply arrived. No subject line. Agreed. Transfer in process. Email draft attached. Termination scheduled before 9 a.m. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled, slow and steady like a sniper after the final shot. I opened the bank app and refreshed. There it was, 7 digits, more than I'd made in 20 years of missed holidays, ulcer medication, and Tom's quick chats at 6:58 p.m. on Fridays. I stood in the dark kitchen, bathed in the blue glow of the screen, and felt it, not joy, not triumph, just completion, like the last puzzle piece snapping into place. I walked to the table, poured a fresh cup of tea, and opened my laptop. The distributor was a beast, a relic, a trap of wires and whispers and rules written nowhere but in the back of my mind. I'd spent 2 decades taming it. Now I was the only one who knew how to make it behave again. But I wasn't going back to fix it. I was going to control it. First thing I typed, purge ghost records in batches of 1,000. Pause queue after each purge. Run integrity script legacy hash Mary 1.0. Do not override errors, the rest would follow. Behind me, the wind howled softly through the trees. The candle from earlier had burned to a nub. Emma was asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever daughters dream when they no longer have to compete with Excel sheets for their mother's attention. Somewhere across the city, Tom was probably reading his termination email with a drink in hand. Chad was likely trying to uninstall Slack from his work laptop like that would erase the memory of the crash. And Alan was learning the most expensive lesson of his career. Experience isn't overhead. It's the last fuse between your company and catastrophe. I closed the laptop after exactly 1 hour, 5 billable units. Then I sat back, took one long, measured sip of tea, and whispered to no one, let's never do that again. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.